Streaming live, this is Tracking the Tropics.
Tropical Storm Karen and her peculiar forecast track joining Lorenzo, the latest systems that we're monitoring here live on Tracking the Tropics with our specialized team of meteorologists joining us from across the country as we roll through the peak of hurricane season 2019. Hey there, everybody. WFLA Now's JB Buno here with you live on stream. Actually, it says Amanda Holly. I am not Amanda Holly. We're going to get that fixed, but I think you might know the faces here on the center and right-hand portions of your screen. Storm Team 8 meteorologist Ian Oliver and KVEO's Robert Bettis joining us again from Brownsville, Texas. We're going to hear from them here in just a second as we look here at the very latest as to what's going on in the Atlantic for September 25th, 2019. But as always, standing by at the weather wall, it is the aforementioned Storm Team 8 meteorologist Amanda Holly. This is the real Amanda Holly, folks, and she's standing by here with the latest on Karen, Lorenzo, and more. Hey there, Amanda.
Hey there, everybody. We've got a couple of systems that we're watching in the tropics right now, including Tropical Storm Karen. I'm sure you've seen a whole lot about Karen on social media recently. Right now, though, wind speed sustained at 45 miles per hour. This is still the 11 a.m. advisory. We may get the 2 o'clock advisory. Actually, I don't know if we'll get one with this one because we don't have any tropical storm watches and warnings. But nonetheless, Puerto Rico still being impacted by Karen at this point. We're still seeing rain and some gusty winds in Puerto Rico, as well as the U.S. and British Virgin Islands as Karen starts to pull away to the north, moving north at 15 miles per hour. And we're going to continue this motion off to the north, maybe northeast there over the next couple of days. So this timing here, Friday, 8 a.m. Friday, wind speed sustained at 65 miles per hour, though, or so, staying a tropical storm. Karen's got some things going against it in terms of its intensity, and models aren't sure exactly how strong Karen's going to be over the next few days because of all of the factors that we're continuing to look at. Right now, we're keeping Karen a tropical storm through Friday, and then I've paused it here on purpose because you see it kind of takes a jog to the east, right? To the east, but then the models kind of stall Karen just a bit, and the official forecast is for it to kind of maybe make a little bit of a loop or at least stall in this general area for a couple of days and then head back towards the west, potentially towards the Bahamas or potentially towards the United States. But recent models don't even keep Karen together. So we're talking about a system that may or may not impact land at all, but a system that may or may not survive at all either. So this is 5 days out, and we're still talking about Karen not making much forward progress. This is where Karen's at right now, and this is where the forecast is for Karen to be, at least in this general area, in 5 days from now. So a lot to watch with Karen, but nonetheless, you see the icons, the forecast icons. Karen stays weak for the next 5 days. We'll continue to keep an eye on Karen, and so will the forecast models. You can see there's kind of a cluster here, but they all generally agree that Karen's going to continue off to the north, maybe north-northwest or north-northeast, stall, and then take a general turn toward what looks like the United States. But keep in mind, even after this, models keep Karen very weak. Ian and I were just talking about that. Some of them don't even hold it together. Maybe it's just a moisture blob kind of heading towards the Bahamas for rain. But otherwise, that's the latest with Karen. Post-tropical cyclone Jerry is kind of impacting Bermuda at this time. You can see there's not a whole lot left of Jerry. Jerry's going to continue to kind of be swept out to sea as well. Not expecting a lot from Jerry. Jerry will become a fish storm. It is impacting Bermuda right now, but otherwise, Jerry's will be no longer in the next couple of days. And then a lot of you are probably hearing about Lorenzo, Hurricane Lorenzo, our 5th hurricane of the season. Wind speed sustained at 85 miles per hour. Looks like a nice, pretty hurricane, right? This one looks like it should on satellite, a Category 1 hurricane here. We've got the outflow, we've got the nice general spin, we've got the symmetric look to it. So this looks like a great hurricane, and we call it a great hurricane because it's sitting over open water, and that's where it's going to stay. Yes, Lorenzo is expected to strengthen potentially into a major Category 3 hurricane here over the next couple of days because it's in an environment that's good for strengthening there, but it is going to stay over open water as it makes its way to the north. So nothing in the way for us from Lorenzo. Elsewhere in the tropics, there's a little bit of a wave here that's next to the Yucatan Peninsula that's going to make its way into the Bay of Campeche. It only has a 10% chance of developing, but something to watch, right? Because Imelda started out with just a 10% chance, but something we're going to watch, nothing that would impact the southeast United States. Otherwise, heading into October, I just wanted to show you this is kind of where we're starting to look for storms to develop and the tracks that they usually take. And you can see here it's a little bit closer to home. This is, I'll move out of the way of the legend here, but the most likely areas for development is in the red, and then the arrows that you see there, those are potential paths for the storms that do develop. So a little closer to home for development there, but that's heading into October. That's kind of what we look at. That's the latest with the tropics, guys. Again, we have Karen, Lorenzo, and post-tropical cyclone Jerry.
Everybody, Storm Team 8 meteorologist Amanda Holly joining us here live on Tracking the Tropics. And Amanda's going to join us now for our interactive discussion as we get here to, oh, actually, that is not Storm Team 8 meteorologist. Guys, I'm hitting the wrong buttons here today. There we go. Storm Team 8 meteorologist Ian Oliver on the left side of your screen, and KVEO's chief meteorologist Robert Bettis on the right side of your screen. Guys, still a good amount to talk about here. Let's start, though, with Karen. That forecast track is interesting. It sounds like we have a little bit of a roller coaster going on here, that loop that we're seeing here as far as what is projected to happen in the days and weeks ahead.
Yeah, JB, we're talking about a forecast track that's uncertain. We're talking about an intensity forecast that's also uncertain. And the NHC has been very explicit in their discussions talking about long range with Karen. There is a lot of uncertainty. Amanda mentioned, we were just looking at the forecast models, the entire suite of them, and most of them, including the Euro, the GFS, both degenerate Karen long-term into a very weak area of low pressure, maybe even an open wave. Could bring some extra tropical moisture towards the Bahamas, but that is far from a certainty at this point. The one thing we know for sure about Karen is we're going to be talking about it for at least a week, because you saw the spaghetti plots. Those run out 7 days, and the motion after that little clockwise swirl still keeps the system generally in the neighborhood off the southeastern coast of the United States. So Karen, certainly one that we'll be watching as we move on through the next several days. Robert, I know what you'll be watching closely over the next several days is that little area of low pressure near the Yucatan, some possible impacts for your part of the country.
Indeed. It's the Gulf is murky right now, and that little area off the Yucatan Peninsula, whether it spins up into a storm or not, it really doesn't matter for my market, because I'm already putting the entire Rio Grande Valley on alert for heavy rainfall on Sunday and Monday. We get a series of little tropical waves, and they don't have to be storms to kick off some very significant thunder showers. So we're likely, and northern Mexico is likely, to receive some heavy rainfall. On that storm, if that 10% chance actually materializes into a Gulf storm, there is one scenario where it could actually head back toward the Houston area. So we need to watch that area in the Gulf very closely. I want to make a comment on Karen. I think this is a very serious situation that we need to watch carefully. There is precedent for a weird storm that wobbled around out there in the Atlantic. It was Hurricane Jean in September of 2004. It took an almost identical track to Karen, passing over the Caribbean, bringing heavy rain. Not such a tremendously strong windstorm, but a rainmaker. It wobbled around in almost the exact same place that Karen is right now. And then Jean passed over Stuart, Florida in September of 2004 as a Category 3 storm. Now, we're way too preliminary to talk about predicting the strength or the possible development of that. But as Ian mentioned, we are going to be watching Karen for a while, and I don't see a necessarily great scenario out there with that storm.
Very interesting to hear, as we're again being joined by, in the top left-hand portion of your screen, Storm Team 8 meteorologist Amanda Holly, along with Ian Oliver. KVEO's Robert Bettis is our featured meteorologist today, joining us from Brownsville, Texas, here on Tracking the Tropics, everybody. And we're talking about Karen, we're talking about Lorenzo, Amanda, Ian, I mean, looks a little ominous out there right now. As far as just the infrared radar looks a little bit ominous. What are we expecting from this storm really in the days ahead? Maybe, Amanda, you can kind of kick things off here.
Yeah, I mean, the conditions for strengthening for Lorenzo, very perfect at this point. We're going to see strengthening of Lorenzo. You're probably going to see in the headlines over the next couple of days, major hurricane out in the Atlantic. And there will be a major hurricane out in the Atlantic. But again, Lorenzo, as you'll see here with the cone on the next graphic, it is going to continue to travel west-northwest pretty quickly, 17 miles per hour, but again, into an environment for strengthening, favorable for strengthening. And then we call this a fish storm or a shipping concern. If a ship is headed in this direction, it's going to be a concern to them, but otherwise not a concern to the United States, staying far out in the eastern Atlantic.
And that's why we're keeping an eye mostly on Karen here and what could be happening in the days ahead, right, Ian?
Yeah, Lorenzo just doing what tropical systems do, what nature is trying to achieve. It would be an equilibrium across the planet. So we're taking heat and energy from the equator, and we're taking it poleward towards the North Pole. So that's why you see that recurve happening. You pointed out how it's forecast to become our third major storm of the season. Just taking a peek back, it's a good time to do a little bit of housekeeping as we've had this very, very active stretch over the last several weeks now. 12 named storms, 5 hurricanes, of course, Barry, Jerry, Lorenzo, Dorian, Umberto. 2 majors were Dorian and Umberto. That's where we're likely going to be talking about adding a third to the mix in Lorenzo. So we talked about, of course, through the early iterations of Tracking the Tropics, we were talking about forecasts for the season.
Yep.
Latest forecast from NOAA, which came out back on the 8th of August, they said 10 to 17 named storms, well within that threshold now, 5 to 9 hurricanes. We made it there. We're likely going to see more. 2 to 4 majors, so we're likely going to be right in the sweet spot. But we're still in the teeth of hurricane season here. Got a couple months to go still, so we're likely going to be adding to those numbers. An above-average season is what we're looking at here for 2019.
Robert, what do you think?
I think it's amazing, and I think that the fact that we're still in September is also very troubling. The Atlantic has been a prime weather maker for these hurricanes. The Eastern Pacific as well. It's been very active out there around Mexico. We recently had a storm break apart over southern Arizona and bring them some heavy rainfall out in the El Paso area, southern New Mexico. So the fact that we still have a couple of good months left is a troubling thing. I'm concerned that all of this action has been centered on the Caribbean and a lot of storms in the Atlantic. The Gulf has been, well, let's say it's been remarkably quiet in comparison to the rest of the ocean water, so I don't trust that. Sometimes the worst storms crop up late in the season, and as we've seen before, especially with the flooding in and around Houston with Imelda, that was a nothing burger. It literally, when meteorologists were looking at it, that low-pressure system that drove Imelda was low power, low grade, but the Gulf was so ripe and ready to produce a storm that any rotation at all spun that thing up and, as we have seen, caused major devastation. So each little blip in the Gulf, we need to watch it very closely. That's why we're watching that particular concern right near the Yucatan Peninsula.
Very sharp that we're keeping an eye, of course, on everything going on here with Lorenzo and Karen. Also really sharp that you guys seem to be wearing almost the very same look here today. Look at the blue suit that we have. We have 2 very sharp-dressed meteorologists here.
Robert is a man with excellent taste. You know what I mean?
Look at that blue suit, you guys.
It's called meteorological uniform.
There you have it, everybody. And, of course, Amanda, always, of course, looking wonderful as always. Guys, I need to get the blue suit here to match you. We need to coordinate a little. We need to coordinate a little better next time for our next edition of Tracking the Tropics. Everybody, that does it for this particular edition of our programming, of our live stream here on this app, on this website, on this social media platform. For Storm Teammate Meteorologist Amanda Holly, the 2 guys dressed in blue here, Storm Teammate Meteorologist Ian Oliver, and our featured meteorologist today, KVEO's Chief Meteorologist Robert Bettis, joining us from Brownsville, Texas. I'm WFLA Now's JB Buno. Thanks so much for being with us here. We are back on Wednesdays, 1:30 Eastern, 12:30 Central, or if we actually have a storm that we're monitoring a little bit more closely, one that's getting closer to the continental United States, we're going to be streaming more prevalently with special editions of Tracking the Tropics. So everybody, we'll see you on our next edition, whenever that might be. For Amanda, Ian, Robert, I'm JB. Thanks everybody for being with us. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.